generally speaking, is ways of digitizing the real world so that it can turn into photorealistic computer graphics models that we will see in the virtual world. And with some of the advances we have in the ways that we'll be experiencing virtual worlds coming up, it's even more exciting to create stuff that will be in that world that came from the real world, that was like remixed, reimagined, kept all of its realism, but now it's been transformed by our own imaginations. And a big part of where this came from is, even before I got to USC, I was experimenting with trying to digitize stuff by taking photographs of it. So a long, long time ago, in 1991, this is the car that I was driving. I'm not saying the car I drive now is all that much better, but this is a 1980 Chevette. And I had the thought that I could make a computer model of it by taking pictures of it from like the left, the front, and the top. And I found an early computer vision-ish technique where I took those photographs from the different cardinal directions, which I think I can point to here. So this is the top photo, the right photo, and the front photo. And I took those shapes and I passed those silhouettes of those shapes through this volume like cookie cutters to remove all the stuff that wasn't within the confines of the car. And it ended up carving something that was the shape of the car in the middle. And then I had this idea, which turned out to be a really good one, which is to project these photos on as texture maps onto this three-dimensional geometry. So it got colored in like the original car did. And I thought this would make potentially a better model than I could just from a 3D modeling program and putting great polygons around. When I animated it, I got something that I was pretty happy with when the car flying across the screen. And this is in summer of 1991, and it wasn't very high resolution. You can see I was also a little bit lazy because I never worked with the photo of the back of the car, so as a result, the back of the car has the same texture map as the front of the car. Has headlights too. But I was really excited about this because it kind of felt like that was my car, and this virtual thing had some of the same anima or ephemera of this original object. And when I got to graduate school at UC Berkeley, that was what I was interested in studying, and I thought I should try to go for larger scale scenes. And in particular, looking at architecture. UC Berkeley has very nice architecture. It has this great tower in the middle of campus called the Campanile. It's sort of based on the Campanile in St. Mark's Square in Venice. And it's kind of the centerpiece of the campus. That would be cool. Maybe I could walk around, take photos of the Berkeley Tower, and then 3D reconstruct that as well. Well, it's a little bit more challenging to photograph an entire city and whole buildings and do that realistically. But we were able to do that by improving our geometric modeling techniques and still keeping this kind of texture mapping technique. So this is actually a computer rendering from the time of our virtual model of the Berkeley campus. And to get some of the photos, I was very happy that Professor Charles Benton, or Chris Benton, who was soon after that became the head of the architecture department at UC Berkeley over in Worcester Hall. I found out he was doing kite aerial photography, and I asked if he would do a special kite run over the Berkeley Tower for us to help us take some photos, which he was gracious about doing. And so you see a little bit of Chris's work here. Chris Benton. That particular one didn't get up there, but we eventually got it flying and hung the camera off the string and had remote controls to turn it around and take the photos. So these are kite aerial photos. In addition, I actually got permission to go up into the tower itself and then take a panorama of photos all the way around. I didn't technically have permission to remove the windows from the top of the tower, but they were kind of this frosted glass, so what are you going to do at that point? I put them in, so I think it's okay. But the photos I could get from there were just the right vantage point to do a computer rendering of flying around the tower from kind of the same dimension. And then the software that we did, this was my PhD thesis, was a way of reconstructing a 3D model of a scene, of an architectural scene, just from photographs. So the idea is that you load all of these photos into a modeling program, you mark edges on them, and then the computer will solve for the size and shapes of the geometric primitives that make up the scene. And in the same process, it will also solve for where the cameras took the photos from. You can even solve for the focal length of the lenses and figure all of this out photogrammetrically. And the thing that improved upon traditional photogrammetry approaches is that we were leveraging the symmetries and the structure of architectural scenes. So if you want to reconstruct a box shape, it's not an XYZ coordinate of all 8 of the vertices of this box. That would be 24 degrees of freedom. But a box really has just the height, length, and the width. It has a 6-degree of transformation where it is and how it's rotated. But if you also tell it, oh, this box is just centered on top of that box, then there's really only a couple of degrees of freedom to solve for, and we could constrain our solutions a lot. So it took about like a week and a half when we made this model of the campus. It had about 40 buildings in it. By far, the tower was the most ornate of those. That was fun to get that, but it didn't get really fun until we projected the texture maps back on. And I was very careful to try to have basically the same lighting conditions for all of the photos, so that when we photo mapped it, then the illumination that existed in the real world looked like the illumination that was in the virtual scene. And you put the photos on, and then, wow, it started to look like, hey, we're kind of flying around campus. Exciting. In addition, this is something that we wanted to submit to the ACM SIGGRAPH conference. If you've ever heard of SIGGRAPH, it's going to be in LA downtown next August. We just had a really great edition over in Vancouver. And they have a computer animation festival, so the thought was to try to actually create a little bit of a movie that people could watch and enjoy. And this is a clip from the film, so we tried to do a little bit of fun, kind of a more fun flight path, and transitioning to real footage, actually shot on top of the tower with a little architect's model, and back to the computer model. It's not a completely seamless transition, but we're able to have a little bit of fun with that. And this project was actually the first one that I worked on that attracted the attention of some of the SIGGRAPH attendees who were in the movie industry. In particular, the film The Matrix was looking for some ways to create 3-dimensional models of architectural scenes for the backgrounds of the bullet time shots, so they could virtually rotate around the same way that they did their camera array around the actors. And so those folks got in touch with us, we got some software over to them, they hired one of the grad students that I supervised, and that put some of this up on the big screen, which was exciting. I thought a little bit about maybe jumping in and trying to be a visual effects person in movies, but I thought it would be a bit more fun to keep trying to develop technology that people might find useful for something. And the next thing that has some relevance to architectural rendering and visualization was another technique called image-based lighting. And this was the idea that I wanted to do more than just fly around and see the way that it looked when I took photos, but kind of add new stuff to the scene, put new objects in there, and have them look like they were really there, and believe that they were really there. And I realized one of the big problems there is that if you're going to take a computer-generated object and you're going to put a statue in this courtyard that's not there yet, you want to see what it's going to look like. How do you light it the right way so that it looks the way that it would be like if it were really there? And you can certainly kind of manually, in your computer modeling program, try to put the key light in the right direction and fill and balance. And that's really all they did in the movie industry at the time. But the way that something is lit is needs to be subtly accurate. You have to get like the right bounce light from the grass and the skylight and the direction of the sun and the intensity of the sun and its color relative to the sky. So I thought maybe we could just photograph what the light is like and then use that photographic record to illuminate the objects as if they were really there. And what does it mean to photograph light? Well, if you take a picture with a digital camera, every single one of those pixels is telling you how much light hit that pixel. Each one, as the lens works, is telling you a different direction in the scene. Now, there's two problems with that. One of which is that the normal camera doesn't have enough field of view to capture all the directions of light that are important, because light comes from every direction, and even light that's coming from the back of an object can give like significant rim lighting effects around there. So you really want to get the entire sphere of illumination around an object. So, okay, easy solution is you take panoramic photos, which you can do by taking different photos in different directions, or you can take a picture of a mirrored sphere, and that will reflect the entire The other thing that's a problem is the range of illumination that gets picked up in a single photo is limited. Like normally your pixel values, if you brought an image in Photoshop, they go like 0 to 255, and that's legacy because of how much brightness level you can represent in 1 byte of information. But that's also just about as much as a typical image sensor can really record accurately. So, by the way, there's seats up in the front here if anybody's getting tired of the back. If you get a barrel run through and just sit right here if they want to get over here. So the idea was that we need to like capture all the way to the accurate values and looking straight at the light source with the right color and intensity of even eventually the sun. We figured out ways to do that. But generally what we do is when we're taking pictures of like a mirrored sphere or something to that effect, to get all of these lighting directions, what I'll do is I'll bracket the exposure. So I'll take some underexposed shots and some overexposed shots in a whole exposure set, and then merge them all into what we call a high dynamic range photo. And if anybody has one of the iPhones, it's the iPhone 4, there's like a little HDR mode on there, and that's exactly what this thing is that your camera will quickly take multiple photos, one overexposed, one underexposed, and merges it into a photo that has all the information of the highlight detail and the shadow detail. The iPhone just gives you a little bit more, but I would shoot 7 different exposures, 2 f-stops apart, and that would let me see directly the colors of the light source and also the outside of the scene. And then the idea was to then take these images of the illumination, these panoramic images with full range of light, and then light your computer-generated objects with the light from the real world. And it's kind of a visualization, like you have a computer-generated object over here, you texture map your spherical image on some surface surrounding it, and then you ask lighting simulation software. Like today you would use V-Ray or Mental Ray or Blender or Arnold to simulate this illumination, and then you can light synthetic objects with real light. And we made 2 movies for the SIGGRAPH conference in '98 and '99 with that one, which is called Rendering Natural Light. I had this HDRI map or light probe image. These data sets are all available on the website, where I had these little spheres on little pedestals in the UC Berkeley eucalyptus grove. And I didn't do any lighting in the scene other than go to the eucalyptus grove, photograph what the lighting was like, and then tell the computer to simulate that light on those objects. It was simultaneously providing the right diffuse reflection, specular reflection, cell shadowing, just all of that's consistent with each other. And since it's a high dynamic range image, you can also very automatically simulate some bloom and vignetting effects in the scene as well. So you get those nice blossoms of light around things, and I'm darkening the corners of the image a little bit to simulate a lens effect. If it's really bright, it'll still blast out in the corners, but as it moves from corner to center, it kind of explores the dynamic range of the scene. And then the second film that I did was trying to combine that technology with the architectural digitization technology of the Campanelli movie, and that's what was Fiat Lux. So I actually had a couple of days in Rome. I went to St. Peter's Basilica, and after finagling some permission to go into the tripod and hear the sphere, I captured the light inside St. Peter's Basilica. I took enough photos to do a 3-dimensional reconstruction of the interior, and then at that point, the place was mine. I could put anything I wanted in there. And I put these dominoes. We did a physics simulation of the dominoes falling over and the spheres, and it was sort of like this abstract interpretation of the conflict between Galileo and the Church. And it makes slightly more sense if you see the whole film, but the lighting is all just the light that was actually there. There's no manual artistic effort to try to get the lighting to look right. It's really the ability to drop new things into the scene and get the right answer. So then after this, I went to work at USC at ICT. We got busy starting up another group, and I didn't get the next film done until 2004. But it was a bit more ambitious, and this one was about the Parthenon. And the thing that was interesting here is that, as everyone knows, the Parthenon is the crowning monument of the Athenian Acropolis, and a lot of its sculptures are off in London because Lord Elgin took them away in the early 1800s and they're in the British Museum, and they're in a Hoge gallery over there. There's some controversy. I think the Greeks would like the sculptures back. I thought that was interesting, and I looked into the history of the Parthenon a little bit more, and it's really fascinating because it started out as a Greek temple, a Roman temple, and at some point it got built into a cathedral when the Franks were there, and it was Our Lady of Athens Cathedral for a couple hundred years. There's actually an apse that's in there, and then at some point, part of the Ottoman Empire, they converted it to a mosque, they built a minaret on it, they stored all their ammunition in it, and then the Venetians came and shelled them on September 1687, and the whole place blew up, actually, which is responsible for probably 80% of the damage that's happened over the last 2,500 years. Happened on one day in 1687, which is too bad. There it is with the minaret that was on there for a while. Today it's the site that it is. They've been slowly restoring it for a long time. And there's all these great sculptural decorations too. So the thought was let's document it. And here, laser scanning technology had improved. So we got an early version of a panoramic laser scanner that QuantaPoint incorporated. The Carnegie Mellon spin-off provided. We spent a week up there getting 3D laser scans of the Parthenon. And if anyone's worked with laser scanner data, it's kind of these unstructured point clouds of information that you have to figure out how to turn into 3D models. And then using some researchy techniques from our friends at the National Research Center in Pisa and Stanford University, we were able to turn this into a surface model of the Parthenon, of course, deleting all the cranes and the reconstruction stuff that was going on. And it was a lot of data for even 2003. It was, I think, about 60 million polygons or so. So we had to break it up into these little pieces there. And then, to do visualization, of course, we need good texture maps. And we're certainly fans of the idea of taking photos and projecting them on the model to produce your texture maps. But the thing that's hard about this, or the thing's limitation, is that when you take a photo, it is a picture of the architecture, but it's just the way the architecture looks under particular illumination conditions. So the shading that you have in the fluting of the columns here is not really inherent to the column itself. It's inherent to it's a combination of the geometry and the fact that the sun is over here, and all these shadows in here are not dark soot on these parts of the area. It's the lighting effect. Although there are some parts that do have dark soot on them too. So you need to differentiate what's an effect of lighting, what's an effect of the actual texture if you're going to create a computer model of this real place. And you need that information to basically take the lighting off of the photo so you can then simulate new lighting on the photo. Like if you want to do a virtual time lapse and see what that would look like. So we came up with a technique where even if your photos of the architecture are taken under all different lighting conditions, as long as you document what the illumination conditions are at the time of the photographs. So we have a little walkie-talkie system. Anytime somebody took a picture of the Parthenon, we fire off a picture of this lighting documentation system that had like a mirror ball and a black sphere that tells you what direction the sun's coming from. And you kind of see the sun here, but it's like so bright that it blasts out. You can't really tell where it's coming from here. So this darker reflection tells you where it is. It's still so bright you can't really tell how bright it was. Like those pixel values at the maximum values. So to finally reconstruct the total sun intensity accurately, we have this gray sort in there, and we know that it's 30% reflective because we measured it against a color checker chart. Otherwise, it's just like a Bristolian primer paint. And I think this way you can see our time-lapse incidental illumination conditions. So for natural illumination, one photo of this thing tells you everything you need to know about the upper hemisphere of the sky, of the intensities and downside of the clouds and the sky, all the same direct light. And we came up with a process where we can actually iteratively solve for what are the real surface reflectance properties of the architecture, so that if you light it with light that you actually observed it under, then the computer model looks the same as the real photo that you took under that lighting. And so basically, like, you could start out with like a non-properly texture mapped version of your architecture. This is just all the same color, kind of some average distressed marble color. and we digitally illuminated it with image-based lighting to look like the light that we captured at that moment. And then here's a real photo that was taken under that lighting of the architecture. We've matched the viewpoints and the focal length of the virtual lens to the real camera. And the lighting's supposed to match too, and the geometry's been laser scanned, so that matches. So since the geometry matches between the two photos, and the lighting matches, the viewpoint matches, any difference in the pixel values should be due to the reflectance of the material. That is, if this is darker on this column somewhere, it's because the column's actually darker, not because of effects of viewpoint illumination. So you just divide this image by that image, and it tells you how much too darker or how much too bright every point on this computer model is. And from that, you can compute the proper lighting-independent texture map of the architecture that if you put it on that geometry and light it with that light, then a virtual rendering matches the real photograph. And these unlit textures look something like this. And so all of the pixel color variation is due to the way that things are actually colored. And we can do some validation. This is a rendering of our model. And it's not incredibly high resolution because this is a little while ago now, but it matches a real photograph pretty well in terms of the surface color. We didn't precisely go to the trouble of modeling all the geometry of the scaffolding, right, because we weren't going to use them. And in addition, for the project, I wanted to document the shape of all of the sculptures, so we could kind of virtually reunite the Parthenon sculptures with its architecture that we put some effort into reconstructing. And I mentioned most of the sculptures are in the British Museum right now. Actually, a good number of them stayed in Athens. And if you go to the Acropolis Museum in Athens, which is pretty new and dramatic architecture, they'll show you what of the frieze and the metopes and the pediments they have. And there's a couple other pieces scattered around the world. There's a couple pieces in the Louvre, fragments in Copenhagen and such. And what we realized is it would be really great if there's just sort of one-stop shopping for getting the 3D scans of all the sculptures. And there's a museum in Basel, Switzerland called the Basel Sculpture Hall, which among many of its great classical works has high-quality plaster casts of every single sculpture of the Parthenon. Most of these were taken from molds that are done in the 1700s or 1800s. And some of them are in better condition than the actual sculptures at this point because they were cast earlier. So we went over there with our archaeological collaborator, Philippe Martinez from Ecole Normale Supérieure, a little while ago, and we built our homebrew scanning system 4 overnights in the museum, and we got all of the sculptures of the Parthenon, and we could kind of put those back into place. And then finally, I wanted in the film to visualize, imagine, kind of the juxtapose how they're displayed in the British Museum and how they originally existed on the architecture. And we so far cleverly avoided having to ask the British Museum for permission to scan the sculptures, because that's a little thorny issue about the repatriation kind of thing. But I did want to show their gallery in computer graphics and do some cinematography in there. So what we did is we just went in as tourists, we took a bunch of tourist photos, did 3D reconstruction using the PhD software. I think this is the last time that software ever got used. And we made a model of the British Museum. We took photos of the real sculptures, and then we lined those up to the geometry that we scanned in the Basel Sculpture Hall, so we could show the sculptures doing good things. And I think if we're lucky, this will play a little sequence of them. This isn't the whole thing. This is computer graphics renderings of our model of the Parthenon. And I wanted to do this time lapse, but I didn't want tourists all over the place. I didn't want all that scaffolding. So this is all done in computer graphics. The skies actually were recorded on top of our institute in Marina del Rey at the time. We didn't have time to just take pictures of the sky when we were in Athens. We modeled the Caryatid sculpture. That's from the Erechtheion. That kind of is looking at the Parthenon there. And then the crosses all to our reconstruction of the British Museum. And this is the torso of Poseidon, which had really interesting shapes here. So we actually did some photogrammetry reconstruction of that too. And so here's the Parthenon model. We can put the sculptures back in place, and then we can pull back to the British Museum and show what context that they are able to provide for these things. using a really advanced lighting simulation engine for the time. Again, this is rendered in 10 years ago now. It was called Arnold, written by our friend Marcos Fajardo. And it's now getting used in movies all the time to do very accurate simulations of illuminations. We did a brief throwback to, the way that it looked like in its glory days and all of that, but we kept that glimpse brief and fleeting because otherwise we had to do a lot of archaeological study work to get all the colors right. So we did pretty well. And that was our effort to try to use computer graphics and virtual reality techniques to provide another window into the interpretation of this monument and the sculptures at that point. And it's still leveraging that basic process of trying to take photos of things from different angles, reconstruct things in 3D, and then get a model that you can reinterpret to your own imagination. So one of the biggest things that we've tried to address in our time at the Institute is doing a similar process, not for architecture, but for the human face. And for that, human faces have even more interesting reflective properties than architectural scenes. Human skin, it's got shine to it, it's got skin coloration. There's subsurface scattering within the skin. Light actually gets into your skin, bounces around a millimeter or two before it diffuses back out. And a lot of these things have traditionally made it really hard to see in faces. So we've actually built these devices we call light stages that you can put a person in and then take calibrated photos of them. And then the idea is you want to get a great 3D model of their face, ideally accurate down to the skin pores and fine creases, and good texture maps to show it without lighting and show the shine component and all the details. And this is a woman named Emily O'Brien in one of our devices. Our early versions of the stage, we turn one light on at a time. We take hundreds of photos and we try to back out a model with the reflectance from that. Nowadays, we shoot these kind of blurry lighting conditions where we turn all the lights on and then we turn on gradients of light right to left, top to bottom, front to back, and we get how the face responds to light directionally. And you notice that these photos here look very flat lit. These are also flat lit, but the skin looks shinier. And we have an optical way of separating the shine of the skin from the subsurface scattering of the skin. The light hits skin, a little bit of it reflects right off the surface, and that's the shine. And some other light refracts into the surface, bounces around, gets all your skin color kind of stuff, the blood and the melanin underneath there, and then kind of diffuses back out as the subsurface scattering. And that also, as it turns out, affects the polarization of the light. And there's a trick, which is if you start with polarized light, the first surface reflection that's kind of highlights will stay polarized. And you can detect that on camera. And when the light that gets underneath the skin will scatter a lot, it will depolarize, and it will come out mostly depolarized. So if you start with your light polarized, which we put polarizers on all of our lights, then on the camera we put a polarizer that's the opposite direction, and we can take a picture of Emily without any shine on her skin, even though she's lit for the entire sphere of illumination at the same time. It also looks like she's got some strange disease because we put all these little dots on her face to track if she moves or not. But that was done with an eyebrow pencil and washed off just fine afterwards. This is kind of a nice photo. It's lit from the whole sphere of light at the same time, so it's very, very flat lit. And we've essentially stripped away all of the shine of her skin. Like, you don't even see shine in her eyes, even though she's surrounded by all these pinpoints of light. But then you can just flip the polarizer on either the lights, which is what we do today, or back then we flip the polarizer on the camera, and then boom, we bring the shine back in. And since these are digital images, you can look at this is without shine, this is with shine. The difference between those two images, literally subtracting these pixel values from these pixel values, produces an image of just the shine of Emily's skin from the whole sphere of light at the same time. It's another useful image to have if you're trying to create a computer model of how she reflects light. And we're also going to do those different lighting conditions, kind of like soft light from the right, from above, from the front. And if we look at how the light plays off of the face from these special lighting conditions, you can really see it reveal all the skin pore detail in the fine creases. This light didn't blur out underneath the skin because of our semi-translucency. It's really just a reflection right off the surface. You kind of look like the Tin Man here. And it's really just like that almost metallic-like shine that we're digitizing. And if we color encode that, we can get these really high-resolution models of skin texture. Whereas a 3D scan of the face that you might just get from a stereo pair of cameras and some video projector stripes would look like this, we can add on skin detail that looks like this. And this is actually from 2008. We get at least twice this amount of detail now. And we were able to partner with a company called Image Metrics back in 2008 that did facial animation, and they approached us about using some of our high-resolution facial scans to then create a digital face of somebody that might hopefully look real enough that you think that it's just a real face. And that was what we did for the Digital Memory Project. And so this is actually a totally digital face, which is more than 6 years ago at this point. And by some accounts, it was one of the first times that a digital face was achieved. These are the layers and reflectance. That one was kind of just the shine of the skin. That's the underlying polygon model. If you strip the digital face away, her hair and her ears and her body were all real from the original video there. But the entire face was replaced, the eyes, the teeth, the tongue, and all animated. And that was the first time that we had a digital character, like a carbon copy of a real person virtually, that at least when we showed it to Emily, she thought, hey, that's just me. And that's kind of, she wondered what we spent all the time doing. But it is useful for creative projects as well. And we were excited because we had friends who were working on the Avatar movie that the same technique got used to help Weta Digital create digital characters for Avatar. So for example, the character of Neytiri there is based very closely on Zoe Saldana, who had to get in the motion capture outfit, wear a camera to record her facial performance. And then everything that Zoe did would play out on Neytiri's face. Now, Neytiri is not the exact copy of Zoe. For example, Neytiri is blue and Zoe is not. But the face actually has a lot of Zoe in it, and Zoe was brought to our institute, digitized in the light stage, and then these maps and 3D geometry was used to help create Neytiri. In fact, everything from the cheekbones down is the face of Zoe Saldana, and the rest of it still borrows from the textures and shapes as much as we can. And we digitized quite a bit of the cast, actually. This guy here, who's I've gotten to hang out with recently, he's a really cool guy named Stephen Lang. He's the bad guy in Avatar. We've got, and this is from like 2009 or so, pretty darn good model of his face using these techniques. And there's scenes in the movie where he's totally digital, and I'm still realizing this when I saw it again recently. He's totally digital in the scene. He's actually been saying lines of dialogue, and it's a digital version of it. And since there's digital force and a digital amp suit and a digital cockpit and digital light everywhere, it would be a real pain to just take him off of a green screen and try to stick him in there in a way that he looks like he's really there. There's so many cues about lighting and motion that need to match that it's much easier if it's just all digital and we can put it in there. Sam Worthington as well. Got scan. Good record of his face at that age, which is good. This is a scene where actually Sam Worthington is completely digital as well. Again, it's a completely computer-generated environment. We know that Neytiri is digital, but she has to lean down and cast a shadow on digital Sam Worthington, and light bounces between the faces. She's got bioluminescent materials causing some illumination on him. He's a digital model, and it's just easier to do than trying to get a photographic element to play nice with all of this digital detail. It's been used on a number of other films as well. Gravity was a big one last year, and most recently Maleficent had some really nice digital characters based on the actresses Imelda Staunton, Leslie Manville, and Juno Temple, who are all turned into little pixie versions of themselves. And that's some great work done by Digital Domain. We also did a digital level of Angelina Jolie, who's interesting to work with. So she's digital there, and then they can cut to real at that point. So these are the pixies. And the actresses show up for real in the film too. So they really needed a lot of consistency between the pixie versions to the real actors. And they started with some very high resolution scans of their faces and many different facial expressions from the light stage. And then they tried to create a perfect one-to-one match from the light stage data to a digital character that would have the same facial shape and reflect the light the same way. So that's actually our conference room being used as a high dynamic range lighting environment from the light stage data. And then they work on a 3D animatable version of the character that needed to respond to light the same way. So it's got beautiful skin reflections and such. This is work done by the great visual effects company Digital Domain that originally did Titanic and things like that. And then there are great animators who created what are called facial rigs. That are digital puppet strings that will put the face into its different expressions, and those can come from the different expressions digitized into facial scanners. So that all these interesting crinkles and wrinkles and bulges will do things very reminiscent of what the actors really did. A lot of the performances come off of these headcam units with performance retargeting technique, which is pretty impressive. And if you're looking close on these characters, it's really remarkable just how much detail is getting into these things. So the interesting thing is a lot of this technology is also being used by the video game industry. We did a project with Active last year called Digital Ira, where we even had a face that looks not quite as good as these, that has a lot of the detail. And it runs in real time on a laptop or an Xbox One or PlayStation 4. And so the quality of digital characters in video games is going to look as good as what you see on TV and movies. Definitely within 5 years, and some stuff that's really, really good, even by next year. And I think that that's going to transform what we can create in virtual environments that we can even interact with and explore and populate architectural scenes with. Our movie about the Parthenon didn't have any digital human characters in it because in 2004 it would have been too hard. We didn't know how to do it yet. And nowadays, if we make that kind of film, we might very well try to put people in roads going around and try to bring it to life through humanity in the architectural visualizations. And certainly within 10 years, it's going to be kind of drag and drop, grew up your own person, put them there, tell them to walk from here to here and do it with style and grace, and they'll be able to do that. So hopefully new creative possibilities for folks who like to visualize interesting things that start with a thought and then need to be something you're going to communicate to someone else. So I'd like to thank a lot of the people who contributed this work, and then there's a couple websites there that have links to a lot of the work that you can see. So thank you very much.
Questions for Paul? Yes.
Could you say something about the U.S. Army as a research sponsor?
Yeah, so one of the major funders of the Institute is the U.S. Army RGPCom, which comes through their simulation group, and they actually made it possible to start up the Institute back in 1999 because they're interested in having better virtual reality. And what they're able to do, or what they're interested in us being able to do, is kind of partner with the entertainment industry to create the next generation of what can become virtual reality. One of the decent successes, it's a little bit indirect, but the young fellow who founded Oculus VR, Palmer Lucky, was a lab assistant for us a couple of years ago. And we're all excited about working with head-mounted virtual reality and things like that, which again has been done for 20 years. One of our researchers is Professor Mark Bolus, who had been doing head-mounted displays for a lot of his career, and Palmer Lucky really wanted to get his hands on it and know about this stuff. And at the end he said, hey, I want to go do a Kickstarter to try to get this stuff out to gamers. And Mark said, well, okay, haven't really thought on it yet, but go ahead and give it a shot. And that became what's now Oculus VR and has a lot of interest. And I think what really happened is that finally, displays that have enough pixels that if you strap them to your head, you can see clear images resulted. And I think a lot of that's due to Steve Jobs wanting to have nicely current text on iPhones and create the retina displays for that. But a lot of the ways that cheap optics can go in there and get the right frame rates and make it realistic comes from Mark portfolio. So that's one kind of success that we have. And there's basic research money. What they really want to see us doing is getting papers accepted to the major conferences like ECM, SIGGRAPH, and having solid collaboration with industry that are clearly getting the technology used and productized and getting a little better.
I was wondering if you can talk a little bit, I don't know if it's appropriate or not for the sign of the company, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the ethical dimension of this desire to hide the real, because we're filming real actors and real things, but then there's this desire to hide it, to show it again. So, I don't know.
I think that's an interesting issue because we are creating new tools for communication that haven't existed before. And so for a little bit of a period, there's going to be the ability to fool people with it because they just don't know what's possible. One of the reasons I like giving talks, I like spreading the word of like all this cool stuff is possible. And so if you have an idea that you want to visualize, maybe you can take advantage of this. At the same time, it's also a little bit of a warning, hey, this kind of stuff is possible. So be aware of what people can do. It's always, whenever you have a message to tell, you can use technology to try to get it out there. And hopefully it's a good message, sometimes it's not a good message. Leni Riefenstahl was a great filmmaker. She used all the power of the movie industry to say some messages that weren't the best ones to be spreading. Everything can be used, it's more about what the artist is trying to do with it than literally what the possibilities are. I think people know that just because you've read some text in the paper doesn't mean that it's true. I think people know that if they see a photo of a political leader and a criminal in the National Enquirer, it doesn't necessarily mean they were in the same place at the same time. It could have just been photoshopped. And we need to realize that even if you see close-up full motion video of somebody saying something that looks like them, it's not 100% sure that that was actually them saying that. And I think the real warning came in the movie Forrest Gump in 1994, where artists at Industrial Light and Magic photoshopped frame by frame by frame of Kennedy's mouth from some real footage to make him talk to Tom Hanks's character and say things that Kennedy never said. You just get a voice mimic and you can believe it at that point. It was expensive, it was short, it was low resolution, but it's the same thing that we're concerned about with these digital characters is you can, once you have them, you can make a puppet and do anything you want with it. So maybe that hopefully gets at your question.
Well, I was surprised to see how much work you did in this subtle lighting effects, but that seems like that's the issue. More realistic than just
yeah, lighting is so important, and I've gotten a great appreciation of cinematography in movies and why the cinematographer cares about how every single scene is lit, where the lighting's coming from, how it plays off of the person's face or plays off of their makeup, because it does so much to set the mood of any particular scene and to make things look real. If you change somebody's facial reflectance just a little bit, it will alter your perception of that person. It can make them a little redder, they might look embarrassed, or make them a little more shiny, it might make them look nervous if you can make them look older or younger with subtle changes as well. And we're very attuned to faces and details of the reflectance to get right. And I think another effect going on is that lighting has a massive effect on the actual image that falls on our retina. Like, we don't directly see other people or other things, we just see the light that's reflecting off of them, which, as we saw, is a product of what they really are, how they're really shaped, what their real coloration is, times the lighting that's in the scene, which is just as much of a contributor. And so much of our perceptual system is that it doesn't really matter how you're lit in terms of how I need to be thinking about you as part of my environment, whether you're a friend or a threat or something I need to steer around or something. My brain has a big job to do, which is to remove the effect of lighting and just think of what's really there, not what the light is, but all I sense is the light. So fundamental to our vision is removing the effects of lighting all the time. So unless we study light and learn to tune into it, we actually don't see lighting very much. And so many of these effects need to be studied before we're aware of it. And I think that it's because of the fact that we're built to remove the effect of lighting that it affects us subconsciously instead of consciously. And that if you're not getting these things right, it will affect you subconsciously and it will look weird or unsatisfying or uncanny or creepy in some way, but you might not consciously be able to say what's happening. So I think it's very valuable to study how materials reflect light, how artists create light, and then how the physics of light works bouncing around within the scene. You're trying to create images that are going to have the desired effect on people.
I really like to see the arc of your research interests also stemming from far and
Good.
So, what's your next Chevette-like project? In other words, what's the next
Tesla Model S. Did we have a talk from Tesla earlier?
Yesterday.
Did they give one out or no? Okay. Well, so one of the things we're working on is trying to display people in 3D without 3D glasses, like holographically, like they're standing in front of you. And that's a project that we've done. Pictures of any of this. One of the things we built is a kind of a holographic human scale display where we have an array of 200 video projectors, and they will all show a different view of a person. So like in this, it's like 20 feet long. They're small projectors. They're all aimed into like one 4-foot wide, 6-foot tall screen. And the ones that are straight behind the screen show pictures of the person from straight on. And then the ones off to the right show the person from the left, and the ones off to the left show the person from the right. We did this by filming the person from like 30 different directions. And then we used like view interpolation to create 200 directions, and then we all hit it with the screen. And the screen is designed so that it diffuses light vertically, like any good screen would. But horizontally, it only blurs the light a tiny bit. So basically, the light can shoot straight through from the projectors forward. And as a result, depending on where you look at the screen from, you see the person from the right angle. And your two eyes actually get different views of the person as well. So we're working on improving this technology. We did a project with the documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock for his TV show that he's got on CNN right now, where he interviewed a hologram-ish thing. I don't want to say hologram because there's no actual holography. And that kind of work, we're going to improve it for another project. What we're really doing is working with USC's Shoah Foundation to record survivors of the Holocaust and get like 20 hours of testimony from everyone that we can interview, recorded from many high-definition cameras so that they can then be projected holographically and you can like index into this database of responses. You can ask a question, and then if there's a response that they answered a similar question, they can play that back, and it's 3D as if they're right there. That might be the best that we have in 20 years. So that's another big effort for us. Okay, and we're ready. We're probably at the end. Is that right?
With all the data and information that's being accumulated, how are your storage process and speed of that now, and where do you think it's going to be? Because you're saying that it's going to be eventually to the consumer end on video games and other areas of devices. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we benefit a lot from Moore's law in that computers get more storage and faster every 18 months. And the result of all of this is that some of the things that we like invented 10 years ago, they didn't seem that practical. Nowadays, they're really practical. Doing a photoreal face in real time is going to be possible on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 because there's enough memory to store texture maps at 4K resolution of the face in multiple facial expressions. And there's enough processing power to map it on the polygons which are animated. So we're looking forward to hopefully being able to create entire groups of digital characters in interactive environments that all use the technology. So we can follow the curves. I've been working on this long enough to know that the crazy ideas of 10 years ago are the things that everybody's doing today for a lot of technology. So I think it's all going to become possible.
I have a question or maybe a suggestion. The idea about verisimilitude is, of course, not new. There's a sense that you almost want to transcend, the project of verisimilitude, to reach some lucidity or clarity which is in fact beyond human perception. And is that not part of what has always been the artistic project? It makes me wonder whether, I'm curious about, the selection of art, for example, but it makes me think, I wonder if you took some of these tools that you've already created and you analyzed some paintings by Caravaggio, Rembrandt, Turner, and you tried to create, well, what was, of course, their lighting is a work of imagination, desire, and experience. But how, would it be possible, for example, to have the Caravaggio effect or the Rembrandt effect on the Parthenon, I don't know, or on some 3D model or whatever? I'm not sure why I would be doing that.
No, I think that's great. I don't know of too many important paintings that depict the Parthenon in particular. We did do a project in the early 90s when I was working with Interval Research Corporation looking at Monet's series of paintings of the Rouen Cathedral, because he did about 28 paintings, all different lighting, 3 different viewpoints. I think it would have been all from the same viewpoint, but he got kicked out of his apartment a couple times for spilling paint. Had to move a couple windows down. I went with my collaborator, Golan Levin, who's an amazing media artist these days, and we photographed the Rouen Cathedral, dawn to dusk for 3 days in a row. We got fog in the middle of one day, we lucked out on that. And modeled in 3D and then lined it all up to Monet's paintings of the of the Rouen Cathedral. And we could then, with a user interface that Golan designed, change the time of day, spin it around and look at it from different viewpoints, and then also cross-dissolve between a photo and the painting. And you could compare maybe what Monet was thinking, and when you use some of these brighter, crazier colors and interesting impressionistic effects. I'm not really an artist or anything, but I got a much better sense of what he was going for, because I think originally I looked at the painting and thought, oh, he's just kind of going crazy with color all the time. If you look at these photos juxtaposed and how much the lighting does affect the structure, how colorful it does get, and changes, it's amazing that he was perceiving all of this too, apparently. So much of what he was doing was actually very well motivated by what was happening on the cathedral. And I certainly think that getting 3D models of the scenes that were actually being painted by the artists and doing computer simulations of what the light might have looked like, what they saw when they were painting it, could shed some light, so to speak, on the decisions that they were making or the style that they chose. So I certainly thought I learned something from kind of doing something like that. So I think that's a very good point.
I'm just curious, have you explored the implications of this in virtual reality or things like that?
Well, we used to have a colleague at ICT named Jackie Mori, and she was really looking at the effect of virtual environments for trauma therapy and teaching and interactions, and she was very active at Second Life as well. So she was exploring some of that too. The quality of the graphics in Second Life never seemed to get all that good, but maybe when they do the next version of it, Second Life 2.0 or something, or we'll be able to do real-time global illumination very, very soon. Actually, NVIDIA just launched this really neat demo of their new hardware, where they reconstructed one of the scenes of the moon landing. So they've got Buzz Aldrin coming out of the ladder of the lander. They had digital moon, digital lander, digital Buzz Aldrin, digital Neil Armstrong. And they showed that in real time, interactive with spinning around on the screen, they can actually simulate the light on the moon, including the sun hitting the moon's surface and bouncing up and bouncing light onto Buzz Aldrin. And they actually did this, as an idea of showing off how fast their hardware is to do realistic lighting in real time, the kind of realistic lighting you don't have in Second Life when it's fake, and the kind of lighting that you do need to compute if you want it to look like reality. And they were able to debunk one of the already very well debunked moon hoax theories. Is that like, well, okay, Buzz Aldrin's in the shadow of the lander, so how does he have any light on him? Well, you know, well, it's the moonlight that's lighting him at that point. So that's one thing that's going to make it possible to have like a Second Life situation that's looks as real as reality. Another is this kind of technology creating the digital characters. And I think honestly, you know, this whole Oculus Rift thing, even though it seems a little bit overhyped at this point, I think there's enough market force on getting these displays. I mean, Oculus Rift is really, you know, strapping a Samsung cell phone to your head with 2 cheap magnifying lenses. That's what the thing is. Anyone can build it. And the thing is, right now, I don't know, these phones have like maybe 2,000 pixels across, so each eye gets 1,000 pixels. But each eye can really see, you know, the equivalent of like 10,000 pixels across if you let your eye look around. So we need like 100 times as many pixels on each display if we're going to fool people that you're looking at reality. And there was never going to be any reason to make phones any more high-res because we can already see the text just fine. But now with these things, maybe they'll figure out some like micro pixels that you can put this on and then really feel like it's being there. I think that's going to be really cool. I think going and visiting the Parthenon or a reconstruction of the Parthenon in Greek times with all the best, I guess it's still Greek times over there, but all of the best archaeological research, that would be great, you know, and for, you know, the millions of people who can't get to the Parthenon, that would be, I think those would be great applications.
Thank you. We have another panel here.